Barefoot, to run or not to run? If you have also pondered this half-drunk Shakespearean Master Yoda existential question, look no further. I've done my research on this topic some time ago and decided this is a classic try-it-yourself topic. There are both pros and cons, and after reviewing them carefully, I've decided it's worth trying this on my own body and see where it takes me. Stick around and you'll get a summary of the main arguments on both sides, as well as my experience with running barefoot. The Try It Yourself series is meant to give you ideas for things to try or not yourselves.
We usually do it for two reasons. One, there's a lot of debate and controversy around them, and the only real way to get to the truth is to try them out and bear the positive or negative consequences.
Or two, they are not so common things that we, and probably you, would not experience unless we are intentional about it.
So we do the trying for you, and if you like it, you might find it worth trying as well.
Barefoot running continues to be a controversial topic on the internet, with probably more people talking about it than people doing it. People warn about the possible injuries or pleasures of running barefoot. There are also some scientific studies where I will later draw the main arguments from, but in the end, many agree it all boils down to trying it out for yourself. That is probably the only way to find out if this is all a fad or a habit that could bring lasting benefits to your health and running efficiency. I will take you through the main pros and cons of barefoot running, then I will talk about my own experience, and at the end I will make a case for try it yourself. I've also written an article on barefoot running on Medium. I will post a link to it in the description section below. So what are the cons for barefoot running? The first argument is running barefoot is not for everybody. People with mechanical problems need orthotics and shoes to be better aligned. Now, I'm not a biomechanist, so I could not contradict this. It seems to make sense, but I would be curious to know an approximate percentage of people that fall into this category, if this is a significant population or rather a marginal case. In other words, an exception to the rule that does not apply to most of us. If this was the case, as the saying goes, the exception confirms the rule. The second argument against barefoot running, or to be more specific, against forefoot striking, was posted on active.com. It is an article that quotes a study by Dr. Alison Gruber, whose conclusion is, forefoot strike is not more economical than heel strike. First of all, this is not a real argument against. It is just trying to dismantle benefit claimed by forefoot strikers and consequently barefoot runners. So at most, if this was proven true, it would say barefoot running is not as great as it claims, but it would not really bring anything against it. I have at least a couple of problems with this study after reading its abstract. First of all, it was made on a sample of 37 runners. 37 runners. How is this even considered a study with such a small sample? It is really dangerous to try to generalize some findings that were built on 37 runners. But putting this aside, let's just assume for a minute that they were somehow able to find the most representative 37 runners from us all. The study tracked oxygen and carbohydrate consumption. Is this really enough to measure energy consumption? Based on the speed and level of training of each individual, the ratio of fat to carbs being burned can vary anywhere from the 20 to 80% range. So measuring just carbs expenditure would probably not be very accurate. And VO2 max is already a very controversial topic when it comes to measuring athletic performance. But anyway, to wrap up, this questionable study claims that energy expenditure would be equal between forefoot and heel strikers. It does not say anything about the obvious damage the heel strike brings to the joints of the runner, so I would not worry too much about this one. Another argument states that shoes protect your feet from cuts, broken glass, and keep you warm. True, this is probably only real function of shoes. The next list of arguments come from the same article on active.com. You've been wearing shoes your whole life. True. I see this as a word of caution, but not an argument to stop change. Minimalist shoes won't make you faster. Some studies show that the lighter the shoe, the better the running economy, but you can even ditch those and go completely barefoot. Barefoot-inspired shoes won't prevent injuries. Maybe true, so then what is the impediment in changing? Because cushioned shoes don't either. The barefoot shoes are just another way for retailers to make money. I believe this is true. So again, why not go completely barefoot? The general con argument seems to be The modern person spends too much time in shoes, and this weakens many of the foot and leg structures. He is now too weak to run barefoot. If he attempts it, he will get injured. What are the pro arguments for barefoot running? You can strengthen your feet and ankles by using them as they were designed to be used. Take off your shoes and let your feet move on natural surfaces. Or the protection provided by your shoes allows you to get away with sloppy running style. It is very difficult, however, to run barefoot with bad technique and almost impossible to overstride. Now let us turn to some of the arguments claimed by a scientific study posted on Sportsy. While acknowledging that well-designed studies on the effect of barefoot versus shod running on injuries are lacking, running barefoot seems to be associated with lower prevalence of acute or chronic injuries of the lower leg. In other words, you will get some cuts and blisters, but overall you will be probably better off running barefoot. Lab studies also show that the cost of running is lower with about 4% in the case of barefoot running. This contradicts the finding of the previous article, which stated that forefoot and heel strikers use the same energy. The previous article was for using shoes in both cases, but when going barefoot, you get rid of a few hundred milligrams. But let us dive into the claims of the article. It is maybe worth mentioning that this article cites a number of 21 other articles or books from different well-established associations in the US or Europe. Running economy. As expected, the more weight added to the foot, the more energy expenditure, therefore the approximate 4% improvement in energy consumption with running barefoot. There is also warning for runners with diminished or absent sensation in the soles of their feet, a condition called peripheral neuropathy, a possible result of diabetes. If you fall into this category, you should be careful with barefoot running. Injuries. Studies done in Haiti and other developing countries show that injury rates of the lower foot are substantially higher in the shod population. Similar studies in developed countries are non-existent because barefoot runners are such a rarity. Chronic injuries. Plantar fasciitis is a chronic injury that affects many runners. It is an inflammation of the ligament running along the sole of the foot. Barefoot populations have a low incidence of plantar fasciitis, and the study suggests that this might be because of the barefoot landing, which transfers the impact to the musculature, thus sparing the fascia. Do running shoes reduce shocks? A 1990 study claims that running at 14 km per hour on a treadmill does not. And the 1995 study claims that the forces acting on the hip were lower for barefoot jogging compared to various kinds of shoes. More studies consider running shoes protective devices against dangerous or painful objects lying on the ground rather than corrective devices, as their capacity for shock absorption and control is more of an advertising concept than a reality. So who will we believe?
So many studies and authoritative opinions on both sides. I decided to try it myself and see how the pros and cons weighed against each other and against reality. I did fall into the beginner's pitfall exactly as warned in the cons. The first time I tried it out, I just took my shoes off and decided to take a 6 km lap around my favorite lake. I made it about 3 km far and then I had to stop because both my soles were one big blister filled with blood. It took 1 month to heal. I could have completed that running barefoot is not for me and that the con arguments have won. But then I realized I was not being objective. I did exactly what I should not have done, take the shoes off and run as if I had shoes on. I did not care about the correct landing too much or about the muscle or the skin. Of course I got blisters. So I decided to give it another try, this time a fair one. I took it easy. I did a little bit of barefoot walking a few weeks before I even attempted running barefoot. I started by taking off my shoes at the end of a run. First for 200 meters, then I increased the distance slowly to 300, 400 meters and so on. I watched closely the tear and tear on my calves. Ditching your shoes means that the muscles in your calves and feet will have to work much harder to accommodate to a different foot strike and a shorter stride. It takes time for new barefoot runners to build up those muscles. So I skipped some days of running if my calves were really tired, and I maybe ran with the shoes on for another days to rejuvenate. I watched my landing as well, and I tried to have as little as possible friction when I was landing. Because if you have shoes, it doesn't matter, but if you don't have shoes, having this friction when you land will result quickly in blisters. There are much more topics to cover, but this video is getting way too long. One interesting element to ponder is that there are not too many famous runners running almost exclusively barefoot and winning races. There's of course Abebe Bikila winning the Olympic marathon in Rome in 1960, running barefoot while setting a new world record. But there are not many such examples today. Is that because there are not so many barefoot runners anymore, or is it that shoes give us still a competitive advantage in a race? But what about training when we do not care as much about our speed and final time? Is it healthier maybe to run barefoot? Maybe the answer is not a clear black or white. I'm personally increasing the percentage of barefoot running in my total running time, but it is still under 25%. And many elite runners are incorporating short barefoot runs in their training, even though they compete with the shoes on and run most of their runs shod. But what about you? Will you try it yourself? I'd love to hear about it in the comment section below, and see you next time.
We would be really happy to hear from you, so please leave us a comment in the comment section below, and see you next time!